Yahweh's promises. We've been chasing these Yahweh's promises from the book of Isaiah. Just quickly again, Isaiah 45:18 says this, "For thus says Yahweh, who created the heavens. He's the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it. He did not create it a waste place, but He formed it to be inhabited. This is our God. He's the Creator, and this is His statement. He says, I am the Lord, I am Yahweh, and there is none else." So here we have a promise from God, the statement that there is no other God from Him. And we have immediately, we know when God makes a statement. Come on in, you two. We know that when God makes a statement, Satan is going to be right behind him with the counterfeit, with the lie. God is the truth teller, Satan is the liar. For every truth God tells us in this book, Satan has a lie that corresponds to the truth. And the lie that Satan tells about God being the only God is that there isn't one God. There are multiple gods, many, many gods, so many gods that each nation can have their own group of gods. That's how many gods there are. That is Satan's lie here. While God, Yahweh, says that He's the only one, Satan says there are many. He's lying. Satan points the finger at our God. So we've traced a lot of Jewish history. We're down to the fact we're in Solomon's reign and beyond, but I'll make this statement again. King David, Solomon's dad, was committed to worship only Yahweh, and Yahweh, because of David's heart, royally blessed Israel for 40 years. Israel lived. They defeated their enemies. They defeated the Philistines. David was able to defeat the Jebusites and take over Jerusalem, prepare the place for the temple to be built by his son. They were richly blessed by Yahweh during the days of David. They had a golden age. And then Solomon came along, and he married foreign women. And just as God had promised, if you marry the foreign women, they will take your heart. They will pull you away from me, and they will introduce you to their gods, and you will start worshiping their gods, their false gods, their satanic false gods. And that's exactly what's happening in the Scripture. Because of what Solomon had done in turning to the false gods, Yahweh split the kingdom. I just want to show you this picture. When we talk about the northern kingdom of Israel, that's the green here on the map, and the southern kingdom of Judah, that's the orange on the map. Well, if you've seen the maps of Israel that I've always put up, it's the same piece of land. It's not like the northern tribes left the land of Canaan, the promised land, and went further north into Lebanon or Syria. They stayed in their tribal territories. They just became their own independent group of tribes, 10 tribes. And the south, Judah, and the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin remained in their tribal territory in the south. Sometimes I think the way it is said, it seems like the northern tribes went north, like they left and they went somewhere else. They did not. They stayed right where they were. They just would not be ruled by a Davidic king. The son of Solomon would not be their king. So here you have the southern kingdom of Judah, and its capital would remain Jerusalem. And you have the northern kingdom. It maintained the name Israel. So in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles and 2 Chronicles, when you read about Israel versus Judah, you read both of those names back and forth. Israel is the northern group, 10 tribes, and Judah is the southern group, 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. The capital of Israel, the northern tribe, the northern kingdom, was Samaria. You see Samaria right there. Who did we get from Samaria? What name do we get? What group of people? The Samaritans, the New Testament Samaritans. We may talk about them probably next time. And how it is that the Samaritans came about. Who are these people called the Samaritans? But there you go, the split tribe. This happened because of Solomon. God says to Solomon, because you have done this, because you've walked away from me, because you've chosen to worship all these false gods, because I told you what to do and you didn't do it, I'm going to tear the kingdom from you. Yet for the sake of your father David, I won't do it during your lifetime. I'll do it in your son's lifetime. So Solomon was the last king of the united nation of Israel when there would have just been one color here, Israel, the nation Israel. His son Rehoboam, the kingdom was split in Rehoboam's time. Rehoboam lost the 10 northern tribes, what is called Israel on the map, and Rehoboam only inherited the rulership of Judah in the south and the tribe of Benjamin. So that's what's going on here. On Sunday night, we looked at the great King Josiah, the 8-year-old boy turned king who reigned Judah for 31 years in a good way. Tonight, I want to go looking at not the Jewish nation, but at the Gentiles. I've told you for a while that the next group of satanic false gods we're going to look at are the gods of Assyria. And we're going to start that tonight, Yahweh versus the Assyrian gods. The gods of Syria, what we would call today Syria. Damascus is still the capital of Syria. That was the capital of the Assyrian kingdom. So look at this map. I'm going to show you a different map, but it's the same piece of earth. Look at the Dead Sea there and the Sea of Galilee. Now we'll change the map. The Dead Sea's down here. Here's the Sea of Galilee. So it just shows you a little further north what things are up there. And here you see the word Aram, Aramaic, Arameans, all come from this area. This is the Assyrian Empire area. This over here is modern-day Lebanon. And this is where Hezbollah is launching rockets into northern Israel right now. This is the area in which they're doing it up here. Dan is the northern town up here. I'll show you pictures in a minute. But this is where we're talking about, the Arameans. These are the people that were the Assyrians, or the Aramaic people, the Arameans. These are the people who Satan has a new set of gods for. And we're going to talk about that new set of gods right now. One thing, you know how I love a timeline. The events in the chapter that I'm about to ask you to turn to happens in the reign of King Ahab. Think about this for a minute. If you don't know it, don't say it. But which of these kingdoms, was it the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, where Ahab and his wife Jezebel reigned? North or south? Anybody know? Not all at once. Caleb, what's the answer? There's no confidence in that answer. It's the northern kingdom. It's the northern kingdom. You know that because, you know it because you know it, but it's the northern kingdom. The events that happened in Ahab's life, the vineyard that he took of Naboth, are all up here in the Jezreel Valley. It all happened way up here. So this event that I'm going to have you turn to 1 Kings chapter 20 with me right now happened during the reign of King Ahab. So let me tell you the years. Ahab reigned from 875 to 854. He reigned for 21 years in Israel. So what we're about to read about, this warfare with the Arameans and the thought that these people have about Yahweh God versus their satanic gods, that's what's on parade here. That's what I'm going to show you. Happened somewhere between 875 and 854 BC. Now, the northern kingdom wouldn't go out to Assyria. It was Assyria that finally conquered them, but they wouldn't go out until 722. So we're talking about a good 130, 140 years before the kingdom would finally fall. I just like a timeline. 150 years, say, before the northern kingdom would actually dissolve and go into exile into Assyria. 150 years before that, this event takes place. Look what it says. I have these verses on the board in 1 Kings chapter 20. Follow along. We're not going to read all the verses. I'm going to skip around. I just want you to see how the Gentiles in the land of the Arameans, the Assyrians, I want you to see how they mocked your God and how God responded. Remember, this is all about my God versus your God. And here we see God take matters into His own hands when the Gentiles mock Him. The players in 1 Kings chapter 20, verse 1. Who is warring against Israel? It's Aram. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, gathered all his army, and there were 32 kings with him, so he's got a vast number of nations with him. There were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots, and he went up and besieged Samaria and fought against it. Now remember the map. Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. King Ahab is the Israeli king, and this guy Ben-Hadad from Aram gathers kings together out of hatred for Israel and is going to attack Israel. And they have gone up, they've built a siege wall around Samaria. They're trying to destroy Samaria. That's what's going on. Ben-Hadad versus the Jewish king Ahab. 13 verses later in 1 Kings 20 verse 13, it says, Now behold, a prophet approached Ahab, the king of Israel, and he said, Thus says Yahweh, have you seen all this great multitude? Look at the armies that are assembled against Israel. Have you seen Ben-Hadad and his 32 kings? He says, Thus says Yahweh, have you seen all this great multitude? Behold, I, Yahweh, will deliver them into your hand today. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. I am the Lord. I am the only God. These people come mocking, and I'm going to take them down. You say, Rick, where's the mocking at? Can you see the mocking? Go back a couple of verses. Go back a couple of verses and see what it is that Ben-Hadad says concerning his gods. Where is it? He wants the silver and gold of Israel. He wants all the everything that's of value in Israel. Oh, look at verse 10. Ben-Hadad sent to him and he said, May the gods... Is he a worshiper of the one true God Yahweh? Or is he a worshiper of this false satanic group of gods? He says basically, may my satanic gods do so to me. What I plan to do to you, may my group of gods punish me in that way. May the gods do so to me and more, if the dust of Samaria will suffice for handfuls for all the people who follow me. You say, what does exactly that mean? All it means is we can walk into Samaria and each gather in our arms everything in Samaria and walk out of here with it. Even the land, even the dust of Samaria. We've got so many people that if we don't completely annihilate this town and take everything from it, may my gods punish me. And God hears this, the one true God, our God Yahweh, and He says, they will all know who God is by evening today. You see what's going on here? Again, this isn't like a David and Goliath, a man versus a man. This is God stepping in and saying, I'm going to take care of this personally because I will not be mocked. And this man speaking of his great gods and all his gods that are going to deliver Samaria into his hands, I am the God of Israel. I'll protect my people. And that's exactly what he does. Look down in 1 Kings chapter 20 verse 21. The king of Israel went out and he struck the horses and the chariots. God has made a promise. I'm going to give these people over to you on this day, and this is the promise being fulfilled. The king of Israel, Ahab, went out and struck the horses and the chariots and killed the Arameans with a great slaughter. They win. We don't know how much time goes by, but several months, if not a whole year, go by. And later in that same year, the Arameans will come back to fight Israel again, only this time they'll have a new strategy. Who is it that defeated the Arameans in this battle? Who defeated them? Who is it that delivered them for the Israelis to defeat? Who is that? It's Yahweh, the one true God, because Ben-Hadad had run his mouth about the strength of his gods. Yahweh steps in and says, when I destroy these armies, they will know that I am the only God, that I am Yahweh. Did it work? Was it enough for Ben-Hadad and the Arameans to understand Yahweh is the only God? We should all be worshiping Yahweh, or did they not get it? I'm telling you, they didn't get it. Because later in the year or the following year, they come back to battle, their mouths running more than ever. Which is just exactly how the world is operating right now. God's so gracious with our world. He shows Himself all the time, and people just won't fall on their knees. 1 Kings chapter 20, verse 23. This is a new battle. It says this, "Now the servants of the king of Aram said to him, 'Their gods are gods of the mountains. Therefore they were stronger than us. But rather let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they.'" What did they just say about Yahweh God? That He's limited. That the God of Israel, the only reason we lost the battle last year, the only reason they killed our horses and our chariots and slaughtered so many Arameans and the 32 kings, the only reason we lost is because we failed to understand that their God is a mountain God. Our God is a God of the valley, the plains. If we can draw them down into battle in the plains, our God will defeat their God. See what's going on here? And who's going to come into that show? Every single time when a man starts telling Yahweh, "You're not strong enough," He makes an appearance. He shows up on the scene. Just to let you show you what this portion of the world looks like, I am standing in Israel at the border with Syria right here. I'm at the very top of Israel. This is where the rockets are coming from, coming over those mountains or from. There's a town right there. I didn't show you a picture of the town, but there's a town there that when we were there, we were told by our Jewish tour guide had I don't remember what the number was, but over 15,000 rockets pointed at us at that moment. I mean, Hezbollah's been there for decades, ready to fire. They're just firing now. But this is what the area looks like. This is Aramea. This is Aram. This is the country of Aram. And so what the Arameans are saying, the Assyrians, it's the same people, same name. What they are saying is the battle we fought before was up here in these mountains. If we can get those guys down here in this plain, we win. Because their God can only defend and fight for them in the mountains. He's a God of the mountains. He's not a God of the plain. We need to get Him down into the valley. If we get their armies down into the valley, our God Baal defeats Yahweh. Not good. Next verse, verse 24. "Do this thing." This is what the elders, the servants of the king of Aram, Ben-Hadad, this is what they're suggesting. They say, "Do this thing, remove the kings, each from his place, and put captains in their place." So remove the kings with soldiers, and muster an army like the army that you have lost. So gather more men together, and surely we will be stronger than them. We will fight. I'm sorry, I skipped something. Remove the kings, put captains in their place, muster an army like the army that you've lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. So put your army back together, and then we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they. Our God will defeat their mountain God. Our God of the valley will kill their God of the mountains. And he listened to their voice, and he did so. So Ben-Hadad has another army that he's gathered, new horses, new chariots, goes back to fight Yahweh. This is not going to end well now, is it? Verse 26, at the turn of the year. We don't know whether this is fall, we don't know whether this is January, what it means by the turn of the year, but you see months or a year go by, and you get into this season at the turn of the year. It says, Ben-Hadad, this is the king of Aram, Assyria, he mustered the Arameans and he went up to Aphek to fight against Israel and against Israel's mountain god. Or so he thought he was a mountain god. The sons of Israel were mustered. They were ready for war, the way Israel always has to be. And they were provisioned, and they went to meet Ben-Hadad and his reformed army. It says, the sons of Israel camped before them like two little flocks of goats. A tiny little army compared to what Ben-Hadad had mustered. They came before them like two little flocks of goats, but the Arameans filled the country. Can you imagine? It's like 10 people going up against 10,000. There's no way we can win this. I love that we have this fact in here. It seems over and over very clear in the Bible that Yahweh loves when Israel's the underdog. He loves to put Israel in a position where if Israel wins the battle, only God can take credit for it, because there's no way that human army defeated that human army. Can't happen unless God personally did the work. So he loves to win the battle, not by the strength of the Jewish army, but to show his own outstretched hand. Verse 28 says this, so they're ready for war. Israel is horribly outnumbered. Then a man of God came near and spoke to the king of Israel. This is King Ahab. He was an evil king, the worst there ever was in the north. But when you taunt God, he's going to defend himself, even if he has to use the most evil king that's ever been in the north of Israel. He's using Ahab to defend his own name and his own honor. He uses who he wants to. A man of God came near and he spoke to Ahab, the king of Israel, and he said, thus says Yahweh, listen, king, your God has something to say. Because the Arameans have said that Yahweh is a God of the mountains, but he's not a God of the valleys. This is God speaking, a message to the king, to Ahab, because they have taunted me and said, I'm a mountain god, but not a valley god. Therefore, I will give all this great multitude into your hand, and you shall know that I am the Lord. I'm going to prove it again. I proved it last year in battle. I'm going to prove it to you again. It's interesting, too, when you go through these things, that Ahab was a horrible idolater. So while you're seeing the hand of God work with Ben-Hadad and the Arameans to show them I am God and there's no God beside me, you should also be seeing the grace that God is showing Ahab. I'm your God too. Why didn't Ahab bow the knee to Yahweh and put away all his idolatrous ways and his horrible wife Jezebel? Why didn't he turn back to God? God is saying, because the Arameans have done this, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand them to you, Ahab, you horrible idolater. And you should know that I am the Lord. Look who he says to Ahab, you shall know that I am Yahweh. These people have mocked the living God, and the living God is about to let everybody know, Jews and Gentiles, I won't stand for that. Reminds me of this verse. You know this verse, Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. And they have mocked the omnipresence and the omnipotence of our God. They say he's not strong enough to fight in the valley, and they say he's not present in the valley. He's only up in the mountains. He's not down here also. They're chipping away at the essence of God and who he is and his characteristics. They are mocking God, and God says, I will not be mocked. So the Bible says in the book of Galatians, Paul to the church says, don't lie to yourselves. That's what deceived says. Means don't lie to yourselves. Don't let your sin nature, your heart fool you into thinking you can mock God and get away with it. You cannot. For whatever a man sows, that's a farmer word for plants. You gardeners know this. Whatever a man plants, this he will also harvest. Whatever seed you plant in the ground, that's what's going to grow. You're not going to plant tomatoes and harvest cucumbers. So if you mock God, you will harvest the mocking of God. You will harvest God's response to that mocking. That's what he says. You want to live a life and plant this evil and hatred against me, you will reap what you sow. I'm coming. And that's exactly what's going on with the Arameans here. God says, they have mocked me. They say I'm a God of the mountains and not a God of the plains. And I won't stand for it. Next verse, verse 29, 1 Kings 20, verse 29. So they camped one over against the other for 7 days. And on the 7th day, the battle was joined. And the sons of Israel, how does this happen? What happens? This 2 little flocks of goats, they look like 2 little tiny pods of goats against this massive army. And what does the Bible say? The sons of Israel, these tiny 2 groups that looked like tiny 2 flocks of goats, the sons of Israel killed of the Arameans 100,000 foot soldiers in 1 day. You see how God is a lover of Israel? And even though Israel is in horrible disobedience to God, when the Gentile nations would properly mock God and personally mock God, He would come down and do what God does. He would defend His honor and allow Israel the victory over the loudmouths. That's exactly what happened. The rest of the Arameans that weren't killed on that day, it said, but the rest fled to Aphek into the city, and the wall fell on 27,000 men who were left. Who killed them? Jewish soldiers or God alone? It reminds you of what city when the walls fall? When God shows up and the walls fall. Jericho. It reminds you of Jericho. The wall fell on a quarter of as many people as the army killed. 27,000 men were... The men who were left, the 27,000 that fled from the soldiers, were killed directly by God when the wall fell on them. And Ben-Hadad, their king, counting on his God, the God of the plains, to defeat Yahweh, the limited God of the mountains, what did he do? He turned and ran too. What happened to the protection of his God? Ben-Hadad fled and he came into the city into an upper chamber. Into an inner chamber, I have to think of how far to go. That's the story I want to tell. Do not be deceived. God will not be mocked. What a man sows, he will also reap. And Ben-Hadad twice found out that when you mock God by the name of your gods, when you say that your gods are more powerful than Him, when you limit Yahweh, the one true God, and say that He can only defend in a certain area of the world in the mountains, then God will come after you. And that's exactly what He did. Now, there's another, let's just look at it for just a minute. In 2 Kings chapter 17, 5 minutes, we're going to stop early tonight. I just want to show you where we're going to go into next time if you want to read ahead. I am continuing to talk about the gods of Assyria. The Arameans are Assyrians. And the gods of Assyria and the people that worship these gods, these Gentiles, they have a problem with mocking God. But what I want to talk about really quickly is Samaria and what happened in the northern kingdom. It just comes up because eventually Israel will go out, the northern 10 tribes of Israel will go into Assyria, and that countryside, that land of Canaan, all that land will be taken over by a new people. So in 2 Kings chapter 17, we move all the way, we go 150 years down the timeline, and we're in the time of the last king of Israel, and him going into exile, and Assyria taking over the land of Israel. The northern 10 tribes, the people of Assyria take up this land. I'm telling you this because it's important that you know who the Samaritans are. When Jesus met a woman at the well and offered the woman living water, remember that story? Where was He? He was in Samaria. And who was the woman? What does it call her? It calls her a Samaritan woman. Let me tell you about the hatred between Israel, the Jews, and the Samaritans. There's a great hatred between the two of them. The Jews, when the Jews would have to go from the north to the south, they would cross over the Jordan River, and they would come down the east side of the Jordan River and get all the way south around Jericho and cross the river again and then go to Jerusalem. And they would do things like that in the days of Jesus so that they didn't have to step foot in the land of the Samaritans. They'd walk with their families an extra 50 miles so that they didn't have to step foot in the land of the Samaritans. The Samaritan woman tells Jesus, well, you worship in Jerusalem, we worship on this mountain. They had a split, the Samaritans had a different place to worship, but I'm going to tell you right now, the Samaritans are half Jewish. They're half Jewish, and that's the problem. The reason the full-blood Jews hate the Samaritans is because of these verses right here. Look at what happens. In 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 24, the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon. Who's going to take over this land? All of the 10 tribes of Israel have been pulled out of the land. The land is empty. There's empty cities, empty houses. The people are gone. So the king of Assyria said, I'll bring Babylonians in there. So he brought men from Babylon and from Kutah and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim, and he settled them. All these people from these other lands, he settled them in the cities of Samaria in the place of the Jews, the sons of Israel. And these people, this event is what starts this half Gentile, half Jewish people called the Samaritans. This is it right here. So they possessed Samaria and they lived in its cities. These Babylonians. Well, they start having problems. Look at what happens, what it says in the next verse. I went the wrong way, didn't I? No. At the beginning of their living there, these Gentiles from Babylon and all these other places, when they come into Samaria in the northern kingdom, it says at the beginning of their living there, they did not fear Yahweh, the Jewish God, the only God, our Creator. They did not fear Yahweh. They didn't worship Him. They didn't understand Him. They didn't worship Him only. They were idolaters. And how does Yahweh respond to that? Therefore Yahweh sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So He unleashes these wild beasts in Israel that kill several people. It gets their attention. In the next verse, this is what it says. These new Samaritans, these people living in these cities. So they spoke to the king of Assyria. We've got a problem down here in this new territory of ours. We've got wild animals, lions that are eating our people. And so they said to the king, the nations whom you have carried away into exile, who's that? That's the Jews. The nations whom you have carried away into exiles in the cities of Samaria. I'm sorry. No, this is the opposite. These are the Gentiles coming down into Samaria. Excuse me. The nations whom you have carried away into exile in the cities of Samaria, they don't know the custom of the God of the land. They don't know about Yahweh. They don't know the custom. They don't know about the custom of the God of the land. So this God of the land, see, they're still seeing these multiple gods, and we've brought our own gods down here, but this God of these people here isn't happy with us because we haven't included Him in our grouping of gods to worship. And so we don't know their customs, so He has sent lions among us, and behold, they kill them because they don't know the custom of the gods of the land. How many gods are there? There's one God. His name is Yahweh. But these people are living as if there are multiple gods. And the only problem we have is we don't know about this God. Verse 27, so the king of Assyria commanded, and he said, then this is what you should do. You have to learn about their God. So take there one of the priests whom you carried away into exile, and let him go and live there. So go back into Babylon, find a Jewish priest, a priest that knows about this God. Go get some priests and bring them back into the land of Samaria so that they can teach you about this unknown God. So go get a priest who you carried into exile, let him go and live there, and let him teach them the custom of the God of the land. Let the priest, the Jewish priest, teach these Gentiles about Yahweh. So one of the priests whom they carried away into exile from Samaria came and he lived at Bethel, and he taught them how they should fear the Lord. So you think, well, everything should be okay, right? One more verse. You think that everything should be okay because you've got a Jewish Levitical priest now who's teaching these Gentile, these pagans who've come into the land of Samaria, he's teaching them about Yahweh. Here's the problem. Look what it says in the next verse. But even though they are starting to learn about Yahweh and the traditions of Yahweh and some of the Mosaic law, how you should worship this Yahweh, it says, but every nation, the Babylonians, those from all these places where they brought the people in, every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the houses of the high places which the people of Samaria had made. The Samaritans were evil idolaters, and they had high places and temples and all these altars. And so these people brought in their own gods, and they said, hey, look, an altar. We'll just use this one. And they put all their own satanic gods there, and every nation in their cities in which they lived. So all these high places, these Babylonian gods were coming into Samaria. So the Samaritans started worshiping not Baal and Asherah and all the gods of the Canaanites. They brought in their Babylonian gods. The men of Babylon, these are the people that had come into Samaria. These are the ancestors of the Samaritan woman. The men of Babylon made Sukkot Benot. These are names of gods. These are names of false satanic gods. They made Sukkot Benot their god. The men of Kut made their god Nergal, making all their idols, bringing all these gods in. You don't read the name Baal and you don't read the name Asherah and Milcom and Dagon. They've got their own gods, and these are them, and they brought them into the land. They made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima. They brought their own goddess. The Avites made Nibaz and Tartak. They brought their own satanic gods down. And the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to their gods, Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of the Sepharvaim. But what's happening here is they are also, look what it says in the next verse. I lied to you, I'm sorry. I got started and I got to finish it. They also feared Yahweh. Now wait a minute, how's that work? So you are worshiping all your false gods, Sukkot, Benot, Nergal, Ashima, Nibaz, Tartak. You're worshiping all your false gods, and you're continuing to worship all your false gods. And all you've done is reach out and scoop in another god named Yahweh and bring him into your worship. They added him to their false god pantheon. They didn't give anything up. They just said, oh, hey, another god, we've got room for him, and they brought him in. It says they also feared Yahweh and appointed from themselves they appointed from among themselves priests of the high places who acted for them in the houses of the high places. A disaster. They feared Yahweh, and at the same time, they served their own gods according to the custom of the nations from among whom they'd been carried away into exile. They brought their false gods, their satanic gods with them. This is where the Samaritans come from, these people. The priest, the Jews that came back into the land and with the priestly family started intermarrying with these Babylonians, and they became the Samaritan people. The next verse says, so while these nations feared Yahweh, they also served their idols, and their children likewise, and their grandchildren, the Samaritans. As their fathers did, so they do to this day. In the book of John, chapter 4, verse 9, Jesus is speaking to the woman. Here's the verse. Therefore the Samaritan woman, the one that was descended from all these people, therefore the Samaritan woman said to Jesus, how is it that you, being a Jew, Ask me for a drink since I am a Samaritan woman. She understands the Jews hate the Samaritans don't like the Jews. For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So you see right there this idea that the two don't intermix. You know what this is called? When a group of people that worship false gods, when they do not give up their false god worship, they take our God Jesus and the Father and the Spirit and simply bring their God into their worship, and they add our God besides their false gods. There's a biblical, a theological word for that. It's the word syncretism. You ever heard that word? It's syncretism. This is exactly what happens and why the missionaries, it's S-Y-N. I'll spell it S-Y-N. C-R-E-T-I-S-M, syncretism. And this is why our missionaries have to be so careful when they go out into the jungles, into the backcountry, into these backward places where people worship all these false gods and they have totem poles and all this oddness. What the missionary has to be careful of is that when they introduce the Father and Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, that the pagans in the land don't just say, oh yeah, we'll take that. We believe in Him. Because if you just believe in Jesus, but you continue worshiping all your false gods, then you by definition have the wrong Jesus, because He exists as the one true God. You can't have Jesus and worship a God beside Him, a false god. So that's why the missionaries have to be so careful in what they do and how they pronounce what they pronounce. That, oh, we saved 52 people today. Yeah, but did they renounce? Did they turn away from their pagan, false, satanic God worship and bow down to Yahweh as their creator? Or did they just scoop Him into their system? And I think a lot of times that's exactly what happens. Syncretism, they just scoop Him into their system. And the missionary thinks he saved people, but he really hasn't. Next time we move further, more Assyrian mocking of Yahweh. That's what we'll look at next time we get together. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.